Our experience is that women undercover operatives are often able to get a lot more information for different reasons, partly because we are often underestimated.
And it ended up me being in this place. I was with a fake name, with a, fake haircut and funny looking glasses and a camera in my watch, walking around all these Nazis and neo-Nazis and whatever.
I'm a student of the art of war. And in the art of war, it says that you need to realize the conditions for victory before engaging in battle. And really what that means is you have to plan a lot. So yeah, we spent 7 months planning for this.
This month, we're covering all things undercover. And if, like me, you are intrigued by the guests that we have on and really want to know what it takes to go undercover as a journalist, you're in the right place.
Yeah, when I think of investigative journalism, the first thing that comes to mind is people going undercover with like a secret microphone under their shirt and a hidden camera in their pen. But when I started actually working in investigative journalism at Lighthouse, I was really surprised by how few investigations actually involve an undercover element. But after talking with our guests for today's episode, I can really see why it's just a lot of work and a lot of stress.
Yes, exactly. Stress is the key word. My heart rate was like increasing just listening to some of these stories. But if you are intrigued by what it takes to do this type of work, this episode will basically give you a crash course.
Yeah, and obviously there's so much to think about when it comes to going undercover. But today we're going to look at just 3 aspects, and the episode will be broken down into corresponding parts.
Yeah, so in part 1, we're going to go into how to build your character. Then part 2, how to plan for success, from the nerdy tech involved to the exact angle your car needs to be at to make a quick getaway. And finally, part 3, which is what the day of an undercover operation actually looks like.
And since it's such a big issue and there are so many different types of investigations, we have 4 guests today. So, firstly, we're going to speak to our colleagues Crofton and Emmanuel Freudenthal, who are part of the team that went undercover for our recent surveillance secrets investigation. Basically, this investigation, in a nutshell, revealed a previously unknown phone tracking company who had been selling powerful spy tools to track all types of people from all over the world, from journalists to activists, business people, diplomats, and in some cases, just regular people who actually had no idea they were being tracked until we called them for this investigation.
Yes, and we're also going to be speaking to John Peters, who's a senior reporter at Correctiv, which is a German nonprofit investigative newsroom. And Jean has a really interesting background. He's done everything from playwriting to professional clowning, and he has a long track record of doing undercover work. So we spoke to him about an investigation that he went undercover for that revealed how the far-right party in Germany, AfD, was holding a gathering with other far-right extremists and neo-Nazis and nationalists to basically prepare what was a master plan to expel millions of people from Germany. So stay with us because this story involves everything from saunas to expensive palaces that neo-Nazis like to hang out in.
Yeah, it's a super exciting one. And I'm also really curious to know what the professional clowning to professional undercover investigator career track is like. I mean, surely there are a lot of similar skills involved. But finally, to top things off, we will be speaking to Vina, who leads Wildlight, a nonprofit organization which does investigations on everything from social justice to environmental crimes and animal welfare. Vina will be sharing some tips she learned from her career doing and leading undercover investigations. And she'll also tell us why women make the best undercover journalists. And I have to say, I am not surprised.
So you're going to come away from this episode with a lot of practical examples. Doing undercover reporting is not something you do because it's cool or for the sake of it. You have to think deeply about the public interest aspect of telling a story in this way that really couldn't be done in any other way. Let's get into it. From Lighthouse Reports, this is Backlight. Every month, we take you behind the scenes of real-world collaborative investigations.
We're your hosts, Impact Editor Tessa Pang
and investigative reporter Beatriz de Silva. Okay, so first of all, how do you build your character and arrange for the perfect meeting? We're going to hear how Crofton and Emmanuel built their character, who was this shady businessman called Albert, for our recent investigation of surveillance secrets. And it was actually the first undercover that Lighthouse has ever done. So here's Crofton, our senior reporter and editor, who led the investigation.
Going undercover it's not a trivial thing. It's expensive, it's time consuming. There's like legal and ethical issues. You have to be clear that when you do it, you're not doing it as a fishing expedition, right? You have to have a kind of idea in mind of the goal that you need to get, and you have to know that you can't get it any other way. So the situation we were in was, by the time we were talking about potentially doing an undercover approach, we'd been working on the company and the data set that we obtained relating to them for probably 6-7 months. And we could tell from the data that there was an awful lot of activity that had gone on that didn't look like the kind of activity that surveillance companies are supposed to be doing. So there was stuff that seemed to be targeted at journalists. There was stuff that seemed to be targeted at politicians, civil society people, business people. There was stuff that looked like corporate espionage. There was a lot of things that raised questions for us about who are the clientele here. Normally, these types of companies always say, oh, well, we only allow our stuff to be used for, the most serious cases of crime and terrorism. What we were seeing wasn't that.
So the team went undercover to answer the question, who would this company, First WAP, sell their services to? And that's where Albert, or as we know him, Emmanuel, comes in.
Hi, I'm Emmanuel Freudenthal. I'm the investigations editor for the Food Systems newsroom at Lighthouse Reports. The character needed to be someone who can get into a deal with a surveillance company and get them to explore possibilities of having contracts with people they shouldn't have contracts with. Crofton came up with the idea to have this kind of middleman so that also there's not so much decision-making power for that character. And so that character was basically a businessman who was working all over West Africa.
It's a shady space. Naturally, shady people gravitate towards it. So we decided to kind of lean into that and create a shady character, because it didn't seem somehow unbelievable. If anything, it made him seem more believable the more shady he was. So when we created this guy who's like festooned with red flags like village bunting, he's got an address in the British Virgin Islands, he's got no track record of operating in industry, he's got a totally almost blank LinkedIn site, his company name doesn't match his website name, he just looks sketchy. And sometimes we said to ourselves, we've made him too sketchy, they're never going to deal with this guy. But it was kind of important to us to make him sketchy because we wanted to see where their red lines were. Are they going to at some point say, sorry, we're not going to do business with this guy who looks as sketchy as this? So we were just kind of pushing it and pushing it. It wasn't just about like how you portray, how you build the character. It's also about how does he act. So, when they send him an email, does he answer immediately? Well, no, he doesn't, because like these sketchy characters are off doing other things and there are other bits of sketchy business. So, maybe he might leave it like 4 or 5 days before answering. And, thus it is that we came upon Emmanuel, and the character we created. He's like Emmanuel's Borgesian doppelganger, he's like Emmanuel if Emmanuel went to the dark side.
So thinking about how to build a character involves everything from deciding how long they'd take to reply to a text or an email, to figuring out what kind of language they would use. Really, it's kind of like taking an acting class.
Yeah, and once we built this first character, we had to figure out the perfect time for Albert to test whether or not this company, First WAP, would sell to him. So the idea was that he'd fly to this super secret spyware fair in Prague and basically meet the people behind this company and act as a client wanting to buy this spyware.
Yeah, it was a situation where we knew exactly the kind of persona that we wanted to build to interact with the company, but we had to find a situation in order for that person to meet the company. But sometimes in undercovers, it so happens that you find an event first that you want to infiltrate, and then that shapes the character that you're able to develop.
So I was just in Sicily. I was going for a hike, and in the middle of the National Reserve, I got like a ping on my mobile, and I was like, oh, I just want to hike in the nature, but let's have a look. And there it was. There I got the message that led me to this investigation that would change my life. What I got there is a letter, a picture of a letter that was inviting to the patriotic cause, and we have to change the country, and you can pay money into a neutral account. And it was signed by one very right extremist person who was also a dentist in his bourgeois life, but an active right extremist activist, and a millionaire, multimillionaire, who you could find online as someone who would invest in different companies. And I felt this is strange, this is interesting, and they obviously want to, as it was written in this letter, discuss a strategy for the right and how to take power in the country and in Europe eventually, because the elections were coming up. So I was running back to my hotel as fast as I could and started Googling. You know, as you do, you look online, you search for the people, for the names, you try to find out more. And it ended up me being in this place, and I was with a fake name, with a fake haircut, and funny looking glasses, and a camera in my watch, walking around all these Nazis and neo-Nazis and whatever, people having breakfast and meeting and chatting. And it was just set at a lake. On the other side was a road where we put two cars with dark windows, but with little cameras, so you could see who gets in and who gets out. So we could look at their faces, try to really picture who are the people there.
So to set the scene, Jean ends up in this lavish lakeside hotel in Potsdam, Germany, which is basically a palatial mansion. And the point is, he has heard of this event and wants to know what is going to go down in this meeting, who is there, and what exactly is being discussed.
We asked John how exactly he was able to build his character to infiltrate what was actually meant to be a very secretive meeting.
I prepared my hair. I changed the hair color. I got some very stupid looking glasses that changed my face a little bit, just to feel secure, just to feel that in case someone knows the real me, they will not quickly recognize me. I let myself grow a beard, etc. Yeah, and then I went there and took some time, extra day, to get a feeling for the house and all that. So I was a guest from the house. They forgot to block the rooms that you could rent on booking.com. So I was still able to get on their website. It was all closed, but I was able through booking.com to get a room in there during the conference. So I was booked in a day before. I was there as someone else. My story was that, I'm a guy who is rich, has a big car that I rented. I had a nice bag, leather bag and whatnot. And I had a room for two people. So I came, and my story was one where you don't ask follow-up questions. And it was obviously when she asked me, where's the second person? I was kind of angry and said, don't ask me. So they must have thought, oh, there was a woman who let him there alone, right? And this is not something you go further on. So I was quite on my own. I was grumpy. I was rich. These kind of people don't have to explain themselves. And I was then having good breakfast. I was walking around. And when the conference people came, and the boss of the conference and of the house started asking, well, who is that? Who is that guy? Sorry, it's a private area. You're not allowed here. I could say, well, sorry, I'm booked in. I'm a guest. I didn't feel any fear. I was just functioning. This is how your mode is. Obviously, I had my colleagues outside who always knew where I am. I had a little beeper where I could press on, and then 6 people would get an SMS with my coordinates as a warning sign that I'm in trouble. But it was not, I was not a black person going to a neo-Nazi skinhead concert. I was a rich person going into a bourgeois Nazi place.
The level of detail that Jan has about how he is planning his character is massive. He is prepared enough for this backstory that he can answer most questions that come his way, and hopefully he can't really be caught off guard.
Yeah, it's quite incredible. So, just to wrap up this conversation on building characters, a huge problem in undercovers is obviously safety, and particularly the safety of women. So, we wanted to speak to Vina, who runs an organization that primarily works with women to go undercover, on the types of precautions that her team takes.
I'm Vina Holkar. I am one of the two directors of an organization called Light.
So, Vina's work is a little bit different in the sense that most of her investigations are highly confidential and they're not always credited to Wildlight. So, for their security and of the people they work with on the field, they can't share too much.
We'll try and hire as many women as possible, and we'll also try and train those hires. So we might hire a young woman journalist in Kenya who's worked as a public-facing journalist, and when we're working in the field with her, we will be training her up in our kinds of techniques of undercover journalism so that she can then have that extra skill set that she can go off and use on other projects with other people. The reason that we do it, well, there are various different reasons we do it. One, we believe in empowering women. Also, pragmatically, our experience is that women undercover operatives are often able to get a lot more information for different reasons, partly because we are often underestimated, and the guys who are in charge of these sorts of operations are targets, and they are 90% male in my experience anyway. They don't really see us coming. They don't expect it. They'll often divulge a lot more to us than they might do to a male operative. And we do work with men as well, but the women often have a lot of success where men don't. So I'd almost flip the question on its head. It's not so much about the risks around women. It's more like there are massive benefits to working with women.
I really liked how Vina framed this. So often when we're talking about women doing undercover work or being sent to high risk environments, one of the key considerations is security, which is of course crucial. But what is less spoken about is how it could also be an asset.
And I just think that there's a certain kind of sensitivity around the ways of speaking with people, and women are really, really good at that. Being on the same level as the person they're talking to and listening properly and being open to what's being said, paying attention. All of these things are really, really useful qualities. And especially in these kinds of extremely sensitive environments where often you're dealing with people who are very marginalized and also very much at risk. And when you're asking questions in this way, especially if you're working undercover, you've got to be really, really mindful about not putting those people at risk. And at the end of the day, we do live in a patriarchal kind of environment, unfortunately, and I don't see that's going to change anytime soon. And so, like I said before, 95% of the people that we will be approaching in terms of targets are going to be men. And they're so disarmed. I can't stress this too much. They're so not expecting it to be the case that you're wearing a hidden camera, not expecting it to be the case that you have completely lied about who you are and you have a fake website and you're actually investigating them. And you can disarm them easily and you can get all kinds of information out of them. They'll bend over backwards to tell you things, or they might just, like I say, not see us coming. So it's a real superpower for us, I think.
That's amazing. So basically, more women should be involved in undercovers.
Yes, I am very excited to see you be our next undercover operative, Beatrice. Okay, so you have your character, you have the perfect opportunity to catch your target, but how do you prepare for every possible scenario that could arise? That's after the break. You're listening to Backlight, Lighthouse Report's monthly deep dive into the world of investigative journalism. If you want to know more about our investigations, you can subscribe to our newsletter on our website, lighthousereports.com. Or if you have suggestions on who we can talk to on this podcast, you can always reach out to us at backlight@lighthousereports.com. So a key thing that everybody talked to us about was the need to be prepared. When you're going undercover, a bunch of things can go wrong. Your mic could stop working, you might slip up and accidentally introduce yourself with your actual name instead of your fake one.
Yes. So, something everybody talked to us as being really important is this back office. Basically, some sort of place around the corner of your undercover operation where your team might be hanging around and ready to help you if something goes wrong. So, Crofton and Emmanuel told us a bit about their setup in Prague, where they took Albert to meet first swap executives to test the limits of who they might sell their surveillance software to.
It seems kind of dumb, but I don't really want all of us to go and like hang out in a restaurant down the road when all these guys are like,
that's clearly a bad idea. Either taking a taxi somewhere, but also if you
they're
don't
all
feel...
over like the whole
it's just an easy thing not to make a mistake.
easy thing not to make a mistake about. Yeah. We rented an apartment that was quite a short walk from the venue. It meant that we could be undisturbed, that we didn't have other conference guests like in the hotel kind of always coming up and down the corridor outside the room and stuff. So we had our own little space. It was very important to have that space in order to stay sane and be able to get out of the conference zone. But it was near enough to like come and go. So if there were spur of the moment meetings or if we needed to go back there quickly to ask them something, it was close enough to do that. So basically, like, they need to do like a little practice. You need to talk to each other a bit first before we do the practice. Then we need to do the practice, and then after that we need to get some food, right?
Yeah.
So you want to like talk to him sitting there, or like,
sure.
What do you want to? Are you happy to just spectate for a bit?
Yeah, we're happy.
We had an audio producer, Morgan Childs. She was there. She had the whole place mic'd up, so we were recording everything basically all day long, whatever we were saying, or when I was kind of nervously talking to myself, even that was being recorded. We did like 3 rehearsals of an initial conversation, like the first time Emmanuel's character goes up to the company and says hi, like how friendly and open are they are they like sort of super friendly and open, or are they a little bit guarded, or are they like, we can't do business with you unless you sign this document immediately type thing?
So it sounds like a really great spot for rehearsals, and I can also totally imagine Crofton nervously pacing up and down in the hotel around the corner. And it's where he and the audio team patiently waited for Emmanuel to come back for a debrief.
So, Jean told us that he has a similar setup that he also uses in all his undercover work.
So if you go undercover, depending on where you go, you need a back office. So that means that imagine you're in a situation which is tense and you notice there's a problem. Let's say you are at a conference and you see that the security starts making pictures of you, or they look at you, they start pointing at you. Something is strange, and it's not even security, but it's somebody at the bar. What you wouldn't do if you are still in your role is that you start Googling, that you start finding out who it is, but you basically just make a quick picture and you send it to your back office, and they can make a face scan and try to find what they can find.
And it's safe to say that his team got pretty creative with their back office for this investigation.
Yes, this was my absolute favorite part.
We also found a flyer of the neighbor's company who would be giving tours on boats. You could rent a boat, not just a normal boat, but a boat on which there was a sauna. In the cold November days, you could have a steaming sauna on the lake. And, tourists love that, as did we. We, as reporters, as investigative reporters, and we took this sauna and went as close as possible to the other side of this mansion, of this, old house. So we could have pictures from the road with the cars being on the parking lot there, and from the sauna on the lake looking through the windows. And then we could exactly see how they talk with each other, who is in relation to whom. And we had a full picture from me being inside and from both sides of the house.
I never thought I'd hear the word sauna boat be used as a location for investigative journalism, also extremely German, but I'm just picturing the whole team like profusely sweating while trying to spy on this neo-Nazi conference.
There are a bunch of other things to have in consideration. So, everything from risk assessment to a getaway car if needed. And it's sort of this never ending list. And Vina gave us a little bit of insight into this.
We conduct a risk assessment, which is informed by our in-country colleagues to an enormous extent. And we go through every possible thing that could go wrong, write them all down literally in a big table, tabulate them with a kind of numerical system 1 to 5, most high risk of this happening, very unlikely to happen, and everything in between. And then we have a column of mitigation measures, and we think very carefully about those. Not everything can be mitigated, but sensible precautions can be taken. And one random example would be when we're entering a premises that we're working undercover in, we'll always park our cars away from CCTV. This is just something that we do because we don't want our number plates to be picked up on CCTV. So if it's possible to do that, we do it. We always park cars facing outwards in case we need to run out of the building and jump in a car and get away quickly. Other kinds of technical stuff, I guess this is an obvious one. We work with a lot of kit, and it is extremely important, and I always impress this upon everybody, to test out your kit before you get into the field and make sure you've got all your bits and pieces with you, because once you're in the field, you might be in some extremely remote place up near some border somewhere or other, miles from anywhere, and you're not going to be able to buy a cable if you forgot to bring one with you. So go through all the equipment, check it all works. We use undercover equipment like, for example, button cameras. I don't know if you're familiar with those, but it's basically all of the camera is hidden under your clothing and the lens has the appearance of a button on your shirt, but it's actually a lens.
Yeah, there is just so much equipment that you could use. It's really giving spy movie vibes. So from what Vina told us in our conversation, you can have a camera that goes on the button of your shirt. She also told us about these camera lenses that you can put on the edge of your phone and a camera that you could put into the top of a pen. And she even mentioned a type of camera that you can hide in the lid of your coffee cup. Very cool stuff.
I love this. I know you shouldn't do undercover for the sake of it, but this geeky equipment thing is really, really cool. Although I also can't imagine how hard it is, because Vina was saying there will always be a lot of wires, even in these like small button cameras. You'll have like a bunch of wires underneath your shirts. So you have to learn how to act cool and walk normally. And obviously, you can't wear a see through shirt or something, or else there goes your cover.
Yeah, exactly. High stress stuff and a lot of stuff to practice and rehearse as well. Also, I would be constantly fumbling with the wires and be very, very conscious of it. So I guess that's something you also have to be aware of, is that you have to look normal and natural while having all of this equipment on you. Okay, so that brings us to the final part of the conversation. So the big day arrives. You have your character, you've planned until exhaustion, and now it's time to put this all into practice.
So Crofton and Emmanuel walked us through how the day went for them.
When I walked to the conference, my main worry was whether they'd have metal detectors or anything else that could tip them off to the fact that I had a recording device. But luckily, there was nothing. So I just walked in. Then I realized, okay, I need to be filming. So I went to the bathroom and started to turn on the camera, checked it like 20 times. So there's some footage of me coming out of a bathroom and washing my hands.
So at this point, the people from the company that they were investigating for SWAP knew that he was coming. They had already been in touch via email for months.
And I'm just pretending to be someone else. But I didn't need to pretend to be surprised or sad or annoyed or display any kind of emotions, which apparently is something I'm suitable to.
And so Emmanuel is pretending to be this middleman for these people in West Africa operating a mining company. And they're having problems with some demonstrators, environmental activists that are disrupting their business. And so the point is, he wants to surveil them.
So after walking to the conference, I find the booth of the company that we're looking at. And I recognize, I think, one of the people I've talked with on the phone, Gunther, was the guy I want to talk with. He's there and he's super happy to see me. And then he gave me this whole presentation about what the software can do and like how it can apply to that first scenario we had discussed, which was like pretty mild. It was just to sell their services to a company that was monitoring protesters against their mine. And the company was kind of connected to the government, so it was more like a gray area. And that's when he mentions also, oh, and if they're under sanctions, or if we don't have an export permit, there's ways around that. We can go to Indonesia.
Which are under sanction and export limitations, where you're not allowed to deliver. And if you're just holding a German passport like Johnny, or an Austrian passport like me, I am not even allowed to know about the project, because otherwise I can go to prison.
And of course, the more they're talking, the more I'm like, oh my God, that's like really amazing. But at the same time, I need to focus on the discussion and stay in that character. I can't like just have a big smile because they said, we can ignore that we have this contract and just get our Indian colleague to sign it.
The problem is the export license, eh?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So for this we can find a way.
Okay. So when I come back, I'm very, very happy.
Maybe Emmanuel doesn't sound extremely happy here. He's a very deadpan person, which makes him perfect for this undercover. This ended up being the culmination of several meetups that they had at this conference. So we've summarized it a bit for the sake of time here. But I encourage you to read the full reporting, which has all of the clips from Emmanuel's secret shirt camera as well. And that will be linked in the show notes.
So things went a bit differently for Jean. So he's back in Potsdam, Germany. He has successfully infiltrated this hotel, and then the work begins. He is walking around the hotel and stumbles upon this room.
I still remember how I was in the middle of the room. You have to imagine on the left, on the right, there's a door, and behind me is a door, and I'm in the middle of the room, and in front of me, there is a little pile with letters, and letters is something you want to have as an investigative undercover journalist, because on letters, there are names. It was looking like a pile of letters for everyone joining the conference who would get one. This is a list of the names of who's going to be here. Then I don't need to look at faces and look at pictures later. I will just have the names. But when I approach this pile of letters, I told you, left and right there's door, then back behind me is another door. If every step I go to the front to the letters on the table, there might be some people walking behind me. And so I took my mobile out of my pocket. I went to the table. I took a video. And this was really the moment of high adrenaline. Anytime someone could come. I went back. I looked at my phone and I saw that I forgot to press a button. So I had to do it again, and I went there again, and I took this time properly made a video of all the letters one by one, having all the names. And when I was done, a young man came to me and said, "What are you doing there?" And this guy his name is Erik Ahrens, and he was later on, there was another undercover investigation by an NGO called Hope Not Hate in the UK. And he was known as an infamous, hyper-racist, white supremacist, you name it, Goebbels fan who wants to push the overtone window as right as possible so everybody talks about race openly again. And he was telling me, like, what are you doing there? And basically my answer was just, well, I'm looking for coffee. Do you know where's some coffee we can find here? I want to have my breakfast. And this supreme white race person just said, oh, okay, that's fine. And he apparently was not as smart as he thought he was. This moment for me was really the most intense. And it worked. And then I could go back to my room and upload the video to make sure I don't lose anything on the way.
Oh my God, I just felt anxious listening to Jean retell that story. At this point, he was clearly filming and taking photos of these leaflets with his phone, which could have been a really obvious way to get into trouble.
And he actually told me later that this guy that caught him ended up being an important source for him in later investigations. So anything can happen. But it's safe to say that both these undercover operations were quite successful. The teams were able to get the information that they were looking for and publish really impactful work. So the surveillance secrets investigation led to the telecoms company in Liechtenstein that had worked for decades with First Swap to basically end their working relationship and say that they were cutting off any contact pending the investigation of these allegations. And then in the investigation that Jean went undercover for, called Secret Plan Against Germany, this investigation actually led to one of the biggest waves of demonstrations in German history, and it ended up being covered worldwide. So, all in all, really, really impressive.
Yes, totally. And completely worth the risk. And I guess that's kind of something that you have to weigh up before engaging in an undercover for an investigation. So, Beatrice, after listening to all of our guests, are you ready to go undercover?
Listen, they had me at button camera. No, I'm joking. But in all seriousness, I really, really enjoyed speaking to everyone, and I learned a lot, not just about how to go undercover, which I knew nothing of, but what to consider when you do this work. And really, it's an incredibly difficult and nerve-wracking process from what we heard, and clearly requires a lot of preparation, a really, really solid team, and a good back office. And that's just a couple of things. But what about you, Tessa? I kind of feel like you would have great super secret spy undercover skills.
Yeah, I would love this to be me, but unfortunately, I am really bad at lying and I'm also extremely chatty. So at this point, I'm more resonating with the first swap executives who basically tell Emmanuel all their secrets after meeting him one time. So I think I'd be better placed in the back office.
I actually can kind of see that. Okay, we have to leave it here. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Please do check out all the incredible undercover work mentioned in this episode. As always, links are in the show notes.
In the next episode, we'll be recording from the Global Investigative Journalism Conference in Malaysia, and it will be a bit of a meta episode because we will be talking about how to make an investigative podcast. So you'll hear clips from our conversations with some of our colleagues there, and also some of our snippets from the panels as well. To keep up to date with our investigations, you can follow us on social media. We are on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and Blue Sky, and our handles are LH Reports or Lighthouse Reports. And you can subscribe to our newsletter on our website, lighthousereports.com. And all of those will, of course, be in the show notes.
This episode was produced and hosted by Tessa Pang and Beatriz de Silva. It was sound edited and designed by Spuvio.
Thank you for listening and see you next month.